Well, I thought now was as good a time as ever to take a look at the body of work, such as it is, developed by our Attorney General, Pam Bondi. You know, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the United States. We're going to hit the 90-day mark in her being the Attorney General. And how is she doing? Well, by all measures, it's an unmitigated disaster. Let's just go through it by the numbers and things that I think are important. I want to curate for you the best of, the worst of Pam Bondi. Say what you want about Merrick Garland. He might have been owlish. He might have moved too slow. But he certainly was not a disaster who wrecked the reputation and sullied the memory and the history of what was once a proud Department of Justice. I'm Michael Popok. We got a history here. We're building together on Legal AF. Take a moment, hit the subscribe button. That's your card-carrying membership in our Legal AF. I appreciate you all being here. Let's talk about Pam Bondi. In no particular order, let's just do the stats. I mean, if this was an athlete, you'd want to look at the statistics, wouldn't you? All right. She's been the Attorney General since the beginning of February. We're approaching the beginning of May. Let's do a deep dive. Over 150 lawsuits filed against this administration, not because she's doing a great job, not because she's giving proper advice and guidance or interpretive guidance or jurisprudence to the Trump administration. She's leading him down the path of disaster. He doesn't obviously like her enough to take her advice into stride. He doesn't allow her advice to be part of his policy making. And she is not strong enough as an individual or as a lawyer or a counselor or mature enough to speak truth to power and tell Donald Trump when he's wrong. End result, 150 or more lawsuits that are filed around the country. And how are those lawsuits doing? Is she, once they're filed, because you can't necessarily stave off the filing of lawsuits, can you? How is she doing with her team at the Department of Justice in Washington and at U.S. attorneys' offices around the country once they're filed? Not well. Almost 70 injunctions have been issued. And it's very hard to get it. Let me just tell you something. As a lawyer for 35 years, it's very hard to get an injunction. You wouldn't think so by watching how it seems to be so easy to get an injunction. That's because the Trump position in all of these cases is usually outrageous, unconstitutional, an abuse of power that's so obvious to anybody in the courtroom that the injunctions are being handed out, like Tic Tacs. But there's almost the same amount of injunctions during the first 100 days of the Trump administration as there were in his first 4 years the first time around. And that's a testament to Pam Bondi. Her legal positions are so bad. The orders that she and her henchmen, Todd Blanche and Emil Bove, what they have in common, all former criminal defense or impeachment lawyers for Donald Trump. They're not qualified. And this triumvirate of Emil and Todd and Pam are not doing well because they're forcing their line prosecutors, the ones that go into the courtroom and actually make the arguments, to take unconscionable positions that don't pass the straight face test. And as a result, not only have they lost 70 injunction hearings, and they are now losing the vast majority or the majority of the cases, even at the United States Supreme Court, which means they're losing votes at the United States Supreme Court because how much of an outlier they are, their positions that they're taking are. And they're setting up these Department of Justice lawyers for failure and for possibly losing their law licenses. When you send a guy like Drew Ensign, who seems to be the go-to piñata for the Trump administration, for Pam Bondi, to go into the courts on all these immigration and deportation cases, and you don't give him the information he needs to make an argument on purpose, you don't give him the facts, you keep him in the dark, and other lawyers as well, everybody's going to get in trouble in front of a federal judge, I assure you. And it's already started. Not only do we have 70 injunctions as a badge of dishonor against the Bondi Attorney General Office, Department of Justice, but we've got two separate contempt proceedings going on. One, we had a federal judge, Judge Boasberg, 2 weeks ago, find the Trump administration, therefore Pam Bondi and her Department of Justice, in probable cause to find criminal contempt. In other words, he's going to put people in jail. Now, that got stayed by an appellate court for now, while Judge Zinnes in Maryland is moving forward on her civil contempt proceedings. So again, badges of dishonor, 150 lawsuits, 70 or more losses already. You know, they're the attorneys general and the public interest groups and others are batting 90%, 900, you know, because of the bad positions, bad facts, bad law being argued by lawyers who are the lawyers that are left. I haven't even gotten to the brain drain, the decapitation of the Department of Justice by Pam Bondi, for which she's also responsible. She can't blame Elon Musk. And it's all having an effect in court. So you've got if you file a lawsuit against the Trump administration, you got a 90% chance of winning at this rate. And the Trump lawyers are in the crosshairs of judges because of the positions Bondi makes them take of losing their law licenses. Hasn't happened yet, but we're getting close. There's going to be a referral in the next 90 days, I assure you, of the federal judge of one of these lawyers for the Department of Justice for violating his code of ethics and his professional responsibility and the sworn oath to uphold the Constitution. So let's keep going. We're not done. Now let's look at how these things are being impacted in the courtroom. We just had a 2-year-old U.S. citizen deported without due process to Honduras. And you know who was upset about that? A right-wing MAGA judge named Terry Doughty in Louisiana, which is usually a favorite of MAGA. He's a go-to judge. And he's like, I have a serious belief that this U.S. citizen was deported without due process because his mother wrote a note in Spanish and said it was okay, while the father's a U.S. citizen and said, not over my dead body. How did Pam Bondi's Department of Justice let that happen? That's the same week, by the way, that in New York, lawyers obviously beleaguered with no enthusiasm for their job and probably exhausted because they're doing the work of 3 and 4 lawyers because all the people have left the office because they don't want to be associated with Pam Bondi and her Department of Justice. They filed in New York the same week as the 2-year-old was deported a secret attorney-client memo only between the lawyers for Trump and one of his cabinet level positions, the transportation secretary. It was never supposed to see the light of day. You know, comments like, the judge is never going to go for this argument. We better reverse course. That got filed on the public docket for the judge to see. And then instead of cleaning up behind the elephant and going, oops, sorry, wrong memo, the Department of Justice and Trump decided to bash the lawyers in the Southern District of New York, claiming because they have a sneaking suspicion about that office, thinking that they're part of the resistance, that they accidentally on purpose filed this brief. Look, one of two things happened. Either it was just not a harmless error, but it was an error of an epic proportion, but an error. And it happens in litigation, especially with electronic filing. Yeah. And there's ways to fix it. Or and that's bad. That shows brain drain in the office, lack of enthusiasm, lack of morale, lack of leadership, all on Pam Bondi. Or this is a resistance movement, and you have lawyers in the Department of Justice that are trying to undermine the Trump administration, and that's on Pam Bondi and Donald Trump too. So I don't care which one it is, it's one of those two things. So you got that. All of it's happened. And then what's Pam Bondi's response? And let me one more, then I'll give you Pam Bondi's response. Then 2 weeks ago, to much fanfare, she hightailed it over in a giant, caravan of black SUVs to go to Virginia to announce that right under sleepy Joe Biden's nose was an MS-13 gang leader in Virginia. He's been indicted. I'm here to talk about it. What happened to that guy? A week or two later, under the cover of night, they dismissed the indictment because it was all performative art BS. This is the measure of the Department of Justice under Pam Bondi. What are her successes? She's also losing votes at the United States Supreme Court as we speak. We had back-to-back rulings, 190, 172, in favor of the ACLU and others who have brought cases to stop these illegal, unconstitutional, depraved deportations to a foreign dark prison of people in our immigration system. And they lost twice at the Supreme Court. You know, now in 8 cases, they're losing, or justice is winning 5-3 at the United States Supreme Court against Pam Bondi's Department of Justice. Now let's keep going. Having said all of that, Do you think she would take time, deliberative time, to try to fix things and try to strengthen morale, maybe go door to door at some of the major U.S. attorneys' offices, maybe try to figure out a way to stop career prosecutors who have all quit in the last week, 3 weeks, 3 months, heading for the exits, leaving behind the B and C and D team? You know, when your varsity squad quits, it's very hard to win a game after that, especially when the game is called justice. So all that's going. So what does she do in her managerial debut of running the Department of Justice? She announces that to get to the bottom of the leaks against the Trump administration, she's going to go after freedom of the press. She's going to drop the Biden policy of not trying to subpoena the records of reporters who get the leaks. You know, when you see an anonymous source says. Yeah, that's what keeps our government honest, by the way. And this is one of the just shows you the lack of morale within the Trump administration. Whether it's the Pentagon or the Department of Justice or the FBI, it leaks like a sieve. It's just a leaky. And what is that an indication of? That people don't want to be working for Donald Trump or don't believe in what he's doing. Look, the polls show that. I mean, every time I do a poll number hot take, it sounds like a broken record in the last week. There's another new poll that came out this weekend. Another new poll that says the country under Donald Trump in the first 100 days is in the wrong direction by almost 30 points. 62% of the country believes that we're in the wrong direction. 37% says we're in the right direction. That is unprecedented, to overuse a phrase. Of that group, 70% of independents, Donald Trump has lost the independents, I'm sure, for good. 70% of the independents that gave him and Pam Bondi a benefit of the doubt are gone forever. 87% of the Democrats say we're heading in the wrong direction. Only 27% of Republicans 27% of Republicans also think we're heading in the wrong direction. When you lose a third of Republicans on right direction, wrong direction, this is a disaster for the Trump administration. But you can see why. Look who he has in charge of these things. I'm going to do a separate hot take on Hegseth, but let's focus on Pam Bondi. So now she's going to go after the First Amendment. Now she's going to have to go over the dead bodies, so to speak, of federal judges, because there's still a First Amendment right, and there's still a cloak of protection around conversations that a reporter has. There is a reporter privilege that's been recognized all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. Yeah. See like the Pentagon Papers, see like the Washington Post and all of its articles concerning Nixon and Watergate. Where did all that reporting come from? It keeps the government honest. That's why Donald Trump and Pam Bondi want to get rid of it. So that is her reaction. It's always some sort of distractive policy to take away from her losing record. If she was a coach in a sport team, she'd be fired already after 3 months. You know, with the owner saying, well, the players are just not playing for her. You know, the record speaks for itself. You know, it's all about wins and losses. We're not scoring enough points. Yeah, something like that. Except we're talking about liberty. We're talking about justice. We're talking about our constitutional republic being headed by a Department of Justice who doesn't believe in the Constitution. So we're going to continue to follow the failures of Pam Bondi, which are just a symptom of the greater disease of the Trump administration, right here on Legal AF. Take a moment, hit the free subscribe button, right? That's the way you show that you're in it with us, right? There's rallies, there's petitions, there's voting at the midterms, and there's joining the Legal AF community here in our fellowship. Also allows me to expand, bring in some new contributors. You're going to love it. Hit the subscribe button. Until my next reporting, I'm Michael Popok. In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories, the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.